Hi everyone, I'm Francesco Penta and I'm a Principal Cloud Support Engineer here at AWS and I'm based out of Dublin, Ireland. Welcome to AWS Supports You, where we share best practices and troubleshooting tips from AWS Support. So joining me today is Tipu Qureshi. Can you give us a quick introduction, Tipu?
Sure, Francesco. Hi, I'm Tipu. I've been working in AWS for almost 10 years, helping customers move workloads onto Amazon as part of AWS support.
So, thank you, Tipu. In today's topic, Ask Principal Engineers How to Move Workloads to AWS, we will discuss best practices and tips you can leverage when moving your workloads to AWS, either existing or new one. So, before we get into the details, a quick note to the attendees online. Feel free to use the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen to share your thoughts, your experiences in moving workloads to AWS, or simply any questions you might have through the episode. We look forward to hearing from you. Okay, so the first thing I want to start talking about before we go into a few meaty details of migration is the reasons why our customers are moving to the cloud. There's different reasons. One of the main reasons is cost reduction, but more importantly for agility and productivity. You can spin up resources faster. You can have a lot of the different services that can help you innovate and digital transform your company. Sometimes we see customers doing this because they are doing data center consolidation. Maybe they want to expand or they want simply to have an extension of their own data centers. Or maybe they're doing acquisitions or they want to acquire cloud native companies and they are bridging together their workloads, or simply it's a good way of using data as a hub to bring everything together. As you can see, there's a lot of different reasons. I'll paste a couple of links that tell what are the main reasons our customers are moving in the chat so you can have a look. But the first thing I want to start discussing are the three main benefits that customer will have when moving to AWS. The first one, that's probably the most important and core, is security. Tipu, you have quite a bit of experience in this area, but I'd like you to share with the audience why moving to AWS improves the security posture of your company and what are the tools and services that you can use to be more secure on the cloud.
Sure. Now, at AWS, security is our top priority. And we have created a suite of services to allow you to migrate your data securely, both in transit and at rest, and be able to implement security controls at scale for compliance and, of course, to protect your end customers as well. And we do this by giving you the flexibility to control rules through services and also to give you visibility into what is going on in case there is some threat, in case there is some means for automation, and to make sure that you have the highest standards for your security. Now, in addition to these security services, one of the things I hear quite often from customers is what about cost? What about financial structure? Francesco, how should customers think about that?
Thank you, Tipu. So obviously, as you discussed, security is the most important thing. It is the most important thing for us, and we take this super seriously. It is still a shared responsibility. So we make sure that the security on the cloud is and the infrastructure were as secure as possible. You need still to ensure that your application and what you're running on the cloud is secure as well. And you can find more information on one of the links that I pasted. The second most important thing that obviously it's at least for a lot of customers and a lot of businesses is their financial agility. When you are on traditional data center, when you want to launch a new application or a new service, you have to often plan ahead because you have to order hardware. That takes some time. It might take weeks, months to obtain that hardware. So you need to ensure that you're ordering enough. And that creates a bit of an issue because you have to invest a lot of upfront capital. This is simply not true with the cloud because in AWS, you have a pay-as-you-use model where you can be more elastic with the resources you're using, meaning that if you need more resources, you just launch them. You can be elastic. You can pay for what you're using and you can expand when you need. Maybe you have a peak or a big campaign coming and then remove those resources so that you're not are not stuck with a huge bill. You're just not using them anymore. Why you have to pay for it? Obviously, some customers do have fixed costs. Maybe they have a core infrastructure that will always be running, and you can be flexible in that as well, because we have purchasing models for EC2 and RDS for databases and many other products where you can pay upfront for the things that you know that you will be using for 1 year, 2 years, or for determined period of time. That gives you substantial discounts as well. So meaning that you can benefit from both worlds. Pay what you use when you're expanding, and then save considerably when you know that you're going to use those resources for a while. But besides that, we also offer quite a few services, and in a lot of things that you can do with modernization, it's something we'll see in a bit. You can start saving money by making your infrastructure more agile and be less wasteful. And there are several services like Trusted Advisor, for example, that will recommend what you can reduce, for example, lower instance type, or simply remove because you're not using anymore. That further helps you save money. The other thing that I think that this is also quite important, obviously for some not as important as financial, and obviously not as important as security, but still quite important, is the improving your operational resilience. We have done a study with quite a few customers, a few hundred customers, where we saw that moving to AWS reduced their total monthly incident by up to 43%, and there was a 94% reduction in unplanned downtime. Now, this is not something that happens magically. You will still have to build your infrastructure and improve your applications so that they can withstand failures and that can be more robust. But even if you're not doing anything and you're just moving your application in a monolithic application on an EC2 server, and that server will fail for whatever reason, maybe software hangs up or there's hardware failure. If that will happen in your data center, you probably need to wait for a technician to diagnose it, replace the hardware. That can take several hours, if not days. While in AWS, you can simply relaunch another resource from your latest backup, and you will be up and running in no time. So that also help improve your operational resilience, even though we do recommend designing for failure and having a robust architecture. There's a couple of links I pasted in the chat that you can look at what it means to be resilient. There's a nice two-part blog that talk about the mental model you have for IT resilience in the cloud, but also a link to the well-architected framework that you can use to basically ensure that your next architecture is as resilient as possible and then can withstand failure. Now, Tipu, one thing I want to ask, since you have quite a bit of experience with assisting our customer migrate, is what are the benefits our customers have seen when moving to AWS? Besides the three main things we talked about, what are the numbers? What have we seen with our customers?
So across thousands of customers, on average, it's about 31% in cost infrastructure savings, especially when coming from on-premises. It can be even more. Workloads are more sustainable as well that way. But security significantly improves with 43% fewer security incidents. We also have services such as Shield and Shield Advanced that even when there is a security incident, we are there with you, and protecting you, and then also working with you as well. And then one of the biggest gains, though, is productivity, because as a customer, you no longer have to worry about managing your infrastructure, about the heavy lifting involved with uh, replacing disks or even scaling up physical servers. So that means a big productivity gain for your staff because you get to focus on your applications. And then the best part is actually the increased set of features that are available to you through the AWS ecosystem, as we launch many services based on what customers tell us to make sure that their business outcomes happen. So now, as customers move to the cloud, Francesco, one of the things I hear customers ask about is how do we ensure that our global presence is maintained? How do we deploy quickly, and how do we make sure that we are close to our customers?
Absolutely, people. Thanks. This is something I like to talk about very quite often because it's a very cool subject, at least to me. Customers from all over the world use AWS, and they often have a need of being close to their customers, and they can or close to the business they have. And from what you can see from the slide, and I posted a link to the document that shows how big our infrastructure is and the presence that we have around the world. We have over 25 plus AWS regions that have more than 81 availability zones. This means that no matter where you are in the world, we'll probably have a region quite close to you where you can connect from your data center or have close to your customers. But not only that, all our regions are connected by a global network that's a redundant 100 gigabit network that's 100% encrypted, so it's highly secure and allows you to transfer data rapidly in between different regions. The thing though is that if you are customer facing and you want to be closer to your customers, you can also leverage the 200 plus CloudFront POPs that are all around the world to serve web content or your web application or services. You can use edge locations to run your actual code with Lambda at edge functions. So you can truly be as close as possible to your customer, and even closer by using services like Wavelength, where you can be in the same city as your customer, for example. The other cool services I want to talk about, and I know that we'll touch it in a bit more details, it's actually AWS Outpost, where you are basically getting a piece of the AWS data center inside your data center. This is quite useful for customers that have latency sensitive applications where they have to process the data as close as possible to their actual data center or their warehouse or anywhere where the data is being generated, and maybe process it on location using AWS services like they were using AWS services in the region, and then quickly move the data across their outpost and the closest AWS region. We have a lot of customers that are using these. It's quite cool service, and it's really nice for the customers that have such requirements. So, and yes, I see that the Daily Post is saying South Africa, one day we'll get a cable to Brazil. Maybe, hopefully, we can get one there. But still, as you can see from the previous slide, there is connectivity that can go from there, even though that's a bit bigger round trip. But hopefully, yes, there will be direct connectivity one day. Now, the other thing is that we have talked about the benefits. We talked about infrastructure. We talked about how we really have a global presence and how you can use this to be close to your customers. But we haven't still talked about what you can do on AWS and what are the tools that you can use, both move your workload or create a new workloads on AWS. On this page, you can see quite a few. It's not all the services that we have, but it's a collection of services, and they might be scary to some customers, at least at the beginning, because you have quite a few of those, and you might not know what to use. And you don't need to be scared. You don't need to be afraid. So first of all, because you have to think about this as a toolbox. You have a tool for every need. And also because you can ask experts or you can follow what other customers are doing in selecting which services you might need to use. On the left-hand side, and we'll talk about it later, you can see what are all the services and all the areas that you can use to improve and skill on AWS or ask for help. And most importantly, with AWS Premium Support, which I'm proudly member of, you can always ask for help anytime you need advice, even what might be the next best service to use. But there's different services that you can use for security and for compliance or simply monitor your infrastructure. Tipu, anything you would like to share about the few services that we can see on this page?
Absolutely. So these are some of the core services arranged in categories that are really important when you're thinking about migration. Now, you obviously need compute to run your applications, the actual CPU cores. We give several options of these, some of which Francesco also covered, but EC2, which just had its 15-year anniversary, is really used by a lot of customers, and we allow you to migrate a lot of virtual machines very seamlessly through a few migration tools that we're going to be covering. You can run pods and containers and Kubernetes, and in our Elastic Container System, you can go move entirely serverless, as that has many advantages, particularly of cost and scale and ease. For running this code, storage, similarly, many options to make sure that there is no issue with migrating your application and your infrastructure, in a sense, to the cloud. And so that's why all of these different options are present. It's because customers have different requirements, and each of those need to be covered. So with each one of these categories, you don't obviously have to use all of these services, but finding the right ones for you is something that we will help you with as well. So, Francesco, one of the key things though is how these design patterns use the services effectively for customer workloads. How should customers approach designing?
So that's the natural next question when you're looking at all these services. There's a few things they can do. The first thing is trying to figure out what our other customers are doing or what AWS is recommending. Now I'm going to paste a series of links here in the chat that has a few links to the reference architecture diagrams, our white papers, solutions that we might offer to customers. And also, this is my architecture. This is a quite cool channel where customers are actually explaining how they build things on AWS. But the most important thing I want to talk is probably the best starting point is the reference architectures. Those are built in collaboration with our solution architects and with our experts and in collaboration with our customers as well to analyze different use cases for different industry verticals or even specific architecture for solving specific problems. As you can see from the screenshot, there's things for online gaming, architecture for real-time processing using serverless, even how airlines are using Amazon Alexa for booking seats and flights and interact with their systems. There's really a lot of variety in terms of the architectures. And it doesn't mean that when you're building, you need to build exactly like the reference architecture diagrams are telling you, or like the white papers. You'd be recommended to do that. But obviously, everyone has their needs, everyone has their specific challenges, and then you can still leverage different resources. But it's a great starting point. You can understand how others that had similar problem to yours try to tackle those problems and what was the solution and the services. That's why as Daily Push was saying in the chat, it's difficult to try to figure out which one is the best fit. And it doesn't need to be, right? You can see what others have done. And whenever you're in doubt, then you can ask premium support.
All right. So, as Francesco was saying, you can contact Premium support or AWS support over here, and that is a good channel for having your questions answered. We work with customers daily on design patterns, on best practices, on just general ways to make sure that you are getting the most out of AWS. Now, enablement is really important, especially when you're thinking through migration. There is AWS training and certification, which makes sure that you get training and that you can get certified as well in different areas. Also, our partners are there, both our software partners and our system integration partners, and they also leverage these certifications to make sure that their staff is trained up and certified, and that you also have confidence with using them. So now, once you have migrated onto AWS, especially through some of our partners or professional services who can make and accelerate your business outcomes, you can also have the service and infrastructure managed through the AWS managed services. They will take care of all the heavy lifting for managing the infrastructure so that you can focus entirely on the application. We also have IQ for specific tasks. We also have professional services in AWS Marketplace. So several options available to you for customer enablement. But now that you've thought about enablement, all these different people are here to help you to have success on AWS. One of the questions that I hear quite often from customers is about how to plan the actual migration, especially around the application portfolio. Francesco, how should customers plan for that?
So thank you, people, and apologies. I had a few issues with my camera. Back online now. So the thing that the customers do when planning their migration is normally start taking inventory of what they currently have. So that probably seems like a straightforward thing to do, but not everyone does that. Normally, people will try to start without even knowing what they need to move. But in any case, it would be quite surprising. So in 10% of cases, when analyzing their workloads, customers realize that they don't really need those services or servers anymore. And they will end up retiring around 10% of that infrastructure. 20% of the cases, they will also find that they can leverage things like managed services, for example, RDS, so software as a service, or move to other services that will allow them to leverage the capabilities that they're currently using on-prem without having to think about infrastructure. That greatly removes the effort that is needed to move things around, because you can simply just move your data and move your applications without having to thinking about moving and maintaining that infrastructure. But in general, we see that then when customers have done that inventory of things and they have an idea what they need to move over, it might be quite easier to just lift and shift. So this is something that is often seen with a bit of a stigma. So people think that lift and shift might be a bad thing because you're not leveraging the full capabilities of things. But really, it's something that can help you quite a bit.
I think we just lost Francesco's camera, but the point was that when you are migrating, especially as an enterprise, you have to have momentum. And there are certain applications that are just better to lift and shift, and then you can modernize them later. They might have smaller blast radius. Some applications are more suited for actually modernizing. Some customers actually take a 2 week rule. If they can modernize the application within 2 weeks, great. If they can't, then lift and shift is an option. And we have services that help you with lift and shift. Obviously, we're here to help you modernize your applications as well so that they can be serverless or have similar components as well. So there is a transition though, right? So especially if you're coming from on-premises into the AWS cloud, you might need to stay on-prem until you have set up your infrastructure in the AWS cloud and you have slowly started migrating or quickly started migrating these components. And so there's some services that help you to really get the AWS experience or parts of it on premises as well. So Francesco touched earlier upon AWS Outposts, which is actual AWS servers that allow you to run AWS services on premises. There's also the VMware Cloud on AWS. So if you're using VMware, you can get the same experience on the AWS Cloud. You can migrate your workloads on the AWS Cloud seamlessly and have them integrate with other parts of the AWS ecosystem, which is the largest value proposition, as you can use a lot of the suite of ML services, data analysis services in the AWS Cloud while having your previous application still run on the VMware Cloud on AWS. Similarly, with Kubernetes, we have our Elastic Kubernetes service that gives you the managed experience in the cloud, but soon we'll also be launching EKS Anywhere, which will allow you to do this on premises. ECS Anywhere was already launched as well, so similar container experience that you have in the cloud, having that on premises as well. And lastly, Red Hat OpenShift. So if you're using OpenShift clusters on premises, you can also run those on AWS. A part of managing these compute or servers is also around making sure you have monitoring, that you have CI/CD, that you have management and data transfer. Now, Systems Manager gives you a suite of services for patch management, for making sure your on-premises servers are getting updates. There's automation, there's run command. CloudWatch gets all these metrics, has logs, has events to trigger automation. And then lastly, for the storage component that I mentioned, Snowball or SnowX family gives you compute and storage at the edge or on your on premises. It's and then one of the cool things that Francesco and I were chatting about earlier is uh, these trucks that can actually come and transfer help you transfer loads of data called Snowmobile. We'll post a link about that shortly. And Storage Gateway allows you to have local caches of data and then also stream it to the cloud for to move into our Elastic Block Store or S3 as well. So in a bit, we're also going to touch on other means of transferring data. But before that, I want to talk to you about migrating and modernizing legacy applications. So this is a key thing, especially when you're an enterprise and you're about to move into the AWS cloud. So in order to migrate these legacy applications and modernizing them, you have to think about licensing, how to handle that. You might already have existing licenses which you can use in AWS, right? And then you can also have licenses that we can just give to you on demand. But there's a lot more to it as well. And Francesco, since you're back, how should customers think about modernizing legacy applications?
And thank you again. And apologies about this really video cam issue, not really networking at this point. So, yeah, regarding what they want to think about modernizing their applications, it can be a gradual process. A lot of our customers find that it's a bit more flexible. The added flexibility that they gain when moving to AWS can help them innovate and modernize their application a bit better. So they can start with small pieces, for example, authentication using Cognito, using application load balancers to handle the authentication, removing that from their application altogether, or moving certain functions of their application using Lambda. And when you're already on AWS, it makes it also easier to experiment. You can spin up copies of your infrastructure just simply to have experiments or trying how this will integrate with different services, and it will help you innovate. It is something that you can do, obviously, with the help of experts, but it's way easier to think about what are the capabilities you can leverage to even remove those areas that might be a bit difficult to normally operate. Maybe there is a legacy part that no one in the company really understands and needs to be rewritten. That might be a good candidate to be modernized using containers or using serverless functions like AWS Lambda, and then integrate that with the different services that you might have available. So once you are in AWS, it makes it way easier. I'll give you a few links. There is guidance that we have in terms of migration and the modernization of your application. It is something that you can start following, and that will give you a few hints on how to do this. And looking at the different phases, again, from planning to understanding what's not needed anymore and what are the services that you can actually use, will help you be more modern and introduce those applications, those part of applications using native services. So one thing is that we discussed it quite a bit about the what services you can use, and the fact that you should move and migrate and lift and shift might not be the worst idea, especially when you can then start managing those resources in a bit more agile way. Things I wanted to talk about, though, is how you move those resources. So how hard it is for our customers to start looking at their data center, looking at their infrastructure, their servers, and how they can start moving those to AWS. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is actually Cloud Endure migration. So Cloud Endure is an AWS company that offers this fantastic service that allows you to basically remove all complexity and the risk, almost all risk from migration, by having a service that allows you to, with few clicks, move one or 10 or 100 servers to the cloud with very little downtime, and if you plan appropriately, with zero downtime. It has no additional cost other than obviously the cost in running the resources once you move them to AWS, and allows you to do this with really few clicks. Tipo, you work with a few customers with these. What are the things that customers are liking the most about cloud and your migration?
I, I think customers really like the block replication, and we also just recently launched our application migration service that allows you to install an agent without rebooting any of your servers. Just install it and allows you to replicate the data into AWS. The block migration means that, or the block level migration means that these data can be transferred live into the AWS ecosystem, and then once it's staged, you can really plan your failover once you are ready and you've tested it and you're comfortable. So I think that's a part of the flexibility that customers like. But that's just for your operating systems, right? And we support so many operating systems now, and that keeps on happening. But there's a whole other planning around data itself, for large chunks of data. Francesco, how should customers think about that?
So thank you, Thibault. Before we move to this argument, I wanted to take a question from ETSPN. So I wanted to ask, can you discuss what DNS capabilities there are for zero downtime cutover? So I think that's quite relevant in terms of moving servers and then having two copies of the servers running. So Tipu, can you tell what customers can use to have zero downtime cutover?
One of the best design patterns is actually what we call blue-green, where you have one set of your application and another set of your application that are running. Then you use DNS to essentially fail over from the blue to the green version. This can be in the same AWS region, it can be across regions. There's a lot of flexibility that's given to you here. Now, Route 53 and using DNS is one option, right? DNS has to propagate. You can update the record to point from potentially one CNAME, or you could have SRV records to make sure that there's waiting. Route 53 also offers latency-based routing, offers health checks as well. So the failover can happen fairly seamlessly between your blue and your green, no matter where it is kept when you're using DNS. There are also other options that you can use, such as our global accelerator service, which is also through the global, or our load balancer services that will allow you to failover as well seamlessly and quickly.
Absolutely. And just to add on to these, obviously DNS is a big point in doing the blue-green deployments, and they can help you move traffic from one place to another. One thing that we recommend is always be sure that those clients that are using DNS can indeed respect the time to leave that DNS has to offer, so that there's no request tag to the old servers. Another good strategy is using, Steve was mentioning, application or network load balancer, where you can definitely have the customers move to a single endpoint with global accelerator as well with a public IP, and then move the resources that are behind those load balancers, so that the customers will land on new servers without even having to re-resolve DNS. This is obviously quite useful for public-facing applications, but might work also for internal applications or things that require an IP, for example, to communicate. This is something that can be done. And again, it's quite useful in terms of moving things and cutting over without even having to use DNS, when you can use a single point of reference or a single IP to communicate. You will need those some resources already in AWS. But again, Espian, thank you very much for the question. Now, one thing that I want to mention is moving the data, right? Even when you're doing these kind of cutovers, there might be some planning that might not really went well, or you simply move the servers and you might have data that's on an EFS share or a Samba mount, or basically the shared data that your servers are using, and you want to move that as well. Now, your what you want to do is use a similar service that Cloud Endure Migration does. So automate as much as possible the movement of data for you. Now, data sync is a service that allows you to move data from a number of sources, for example, NFS or Samba mounts, to native services in the cloud. Either can be S3, or you can move these to FSX for Windows, EFS, the other services that integrates natively with. This allows you to, once you move the servers, you can move the data up to 10 times faster, because this is a highly optimized to move data from to AWS, and it's quite easy to use. It's configurable with a few clicks and will give you the same level of business of use that the Cloud Endure migration will have. It's also fully encrypted, so you don't have to worry about the data passing through the network, and you can know that data is in secure hands and is secure by default. This is a great way, again, to reconcile data that you might need to move over, or that might have been generated from few servers that have been left on premise. The other thing, and the tip, I'll actually ask this to you, since you like the service quite a bit and work quite with a few customers. It's about the database migration tooling. So we talk about moving your physical servers or even virtual servers. Talk about moving the data that servers are using, but what about the databases? So what customers can do to move databases, again, trying to reduce downtime and as easily as possible.
Yeah, Francesco, that's always a hot topic with many customers, especially with relational data. Customers have very large amounts of applications that depend on this data. In fact, even one part of modernizing your applications is to make sure that the application data is no longer kept in a single server, right? Not in a single point of failure. And that means these sort of data stores become quite critical. And we give multiple methods to move this data into AWS. Well, the first thing though is that you have to convert schema, right? If you're moving MySQL to MySQL, great. That's fairly easy. We have our database migration service that's going to replicate the data for you. It's going to make sure that you can have the data in AWS, that it can run in the same version or in a tested version of the same database that's working for you. However, if you are moving engines, it's not always that simple, right? You can't just have your stored procedures and the specific schemas work the same between, let's say, a Postgres and a MySQL. So the schema conversion tool is what really helps you there, as it converts the commercial databases to work well with the AWS native services. We also have Amazon Aurora. In case you don't know about it, it's our MySQL and Postgres compatible sets of databases that are very highly available and much better performant as well. We also have a data warehousing solution called Amazon Redshift. And this is where the schema conversion tool is really useful because it helps you convert the schema of that data so that you can then migrate it into AWS using the database migration service. So that was just a little bit about data itself. But what about the visualization of your whole migration, right? The customers want to keep track of that. Francesco, what your customers do there?
Yes, thank you, Tipo, for asking this. So obviously, it's quite easy when you have one, two, three servers. It might be a bit harder when you have to plan and migrate hundreds of servers from your data center, especially because you might have to do these in batches, or you might have dependencies where you want to move some of the servers before others, and again, this might be quite difficult to track. Luckily, there's a service that helps you with that. I think that we left this at last just because it ties everything together. So AWS Migration Hub is a service that allows to give you a single location to track the progress of application migration across multiple AWS solutions. So allows you to choose partner and tools that fit you best. So it doesn't only give you visibility into your migration, but also give you guidance in what might be the best option to do this. It gives you a lot of visibility. You can use a discovery of your server, both with using agent and agent-led solution. And once you have all this data, you can then start organizing your entire infrastructure to move these to AWS. You can also get a recommendation based on the capabilities of your server in terms of what are the instances that you might want to use. So what are the capabilities that you might need? And once you have all these, you can then track your migration. So this allows you to give a tool, and as you can see from the screenshot, it gives you a relation between the different servers and quite a lot of options to have clarity, especially for big job. It works quite well also when you do not move hundreds of servers and you have just a handful, and especially because of the capabilities that we talked about. But it's definitely most useful when you have to track big workloads to AWS. We had quite a few customers using this, and it's used from quite a few partners as well to help and assist our customers migrate, especially when they might not have the direct technical skills, and they may, again, leverage partners to move their workloads to AWS. Tipo, anything else you would like to add here?
Yes. So much we talked about was around planning your migration, the compute, the storage, the data transfer. Just this visualization component is important. But one thing around planning that you must also remember is that we talked earlier that if you can't lift and shift your applications fast enough, and if it's blocking your migration, if you can't modernize your applications, just move forward with lifting and shifting. And there is this important consideration around technical debt. And this is where your long-term planning really becomes important, right? If you are able to move the data into a centralized store, that really helps to make sure that you can scale your applications and not just have a single point of failure as you lift and shift. Now, the migration hub gives you this visualization of your different resources that are coming in. But I also encourage you to have sort of a plan for your migration at which step you're going to modernize which application and based on its criticality and its prioritization. One thing that happens in almost every migration, though, is how to plan the network. You will have a certain network that's running on premises, and you're going to have to plan that network in AWS and in your hybrid system as well, if you're choosing to go hybrid. And so, Francesco, you worked on networking for years with customers. How should we approach planning?
So I'm glad you asked. This is probably one of my favorite topics. So first of all, I pasted the white paper link for hybrid connectivity, so that helps you look a bit at what are the best practices and some that you can reference for the future in case you need assistance in designing the migration of the network. But ideally is that you might want to use this opportunity of moving to AWS by starting using the capabilities of virtual private cloud, so VPC, to segment your network. So having a VPC for development, one for testing, one for production, and maybe another for the shared services that all of these other applications will use. And depending on how many accounts, so if you want to use a multi-account solution where you have accounts for development, accounts for testing, giving it the right level of access, using, for example, AWS organizations, IAM, cross-account roles, and resource sharing to fully leverage these, where you might have a network managed by your networking team, and then everyone else, your developers, consume this portion of the network. So this is for the AWS side, right? So it is something that you can do even if you're just starting in AWS and you're starting building a native AWS service without migration. But a lot of our customers start thinking about a few things. The first one is that, okay, we have our segregated networks where we have our development, testing, and production environment, but we might have multiple of those networks, especially if we have different services. First question will be, how do we move this data across the different VPCs and even across different regions? So solution for this is Transit Gateway. So Transit Gateway, it's a virtual router that sits in AWS that allows you to define routing tables and routing rules to basically say where the traffic needs to go next. For example, if you have your development VPC needs to talk with one of the shared services, you will have an address, and that will go through the Transit Gateway. Transit Gateway will know where to send it next. This can also leverage quite a lot of other things. You can have build on top of these, for example, to start connecting with your infrastructure. This is quite useful, especially when you are approaching this in a hybrid fashion and you want to move things to the cloud gradually, or resources that are in AWS needs to communicate with the resources that are in your infrastructure. And you can do this by basically attaching the VPNs that you might have using AWS VPN, and most importantly, Direct Connect. Direct Connect is a dedicated fiber that connects your data center to AWS, so it's super fast, it's dedicated to you, and obviously the preferred method to connect. If you cannot do this, you can still leverage VPN, or use even both, one for failover and the other for your main applications. And Transit Gateway will take care of that as well. So you define the routing from your data center, and then you know, based on the routing rules and the routing tables in the Transit Gateway, where the traffic needs to be sent next. This also allows for a few other patterns. So, for example, if you have other in your data center, you might want to have firewalls, and you don't really want to buy that expensive content filtering for hardware. You can use AWS to do that as well. So you can use different services from so that users in your network can then go through Direct Connect, through the Transit Gateway, and use those VPC that you're built for purpose to access the internet, where you can do content filtering. You can have your proxies, traffic inspection, so that can improve your security posture. And again, depending on how many users you have, you can scale these seamlessly so that you don't really have to think about how big that appliance needs to be. You can simply spin up more resources based on the actual need. And if at night no one is using the corporate network to access the internet, it doesn't use that, you can simply spin down resources to save on cost. Same thing, you can also have using the gateway load balancer, you can have inline services for traffic inspection so that you can inspect all traffic that's going in and out AWS from your network. Basically, you can send these to a number of both third-party solutions to inspect what the traffic is about. And you can drop a malicious traffic or traffic that's unwanted, so further increasing the security posture. It's really a modular approach. The fact that you can use virtual appliances, the fact that you can use virtual networks allows you to be modular, efficient, and again, more secure. And a few more information, you can find that in the hybrid connectivity white paper that I pasted below. So last thing that we wanted to touch is support automation workflows. Tipu, I spoke about this in a past episode. I'll paste the link so if people want to know more about it. But I want to ask you, can you give us an introduction of what SO is and how our customers can use them to improve their migration experience when moving their workloads?
Absolutely. So, uh, at scale, automation is quite important, and they are automation workflows that are powered by Systems Manager that are provided to you by AWS Support. So these help to solve quite common issues that customers face. For example, one of the most common ones we hear from customers about is connectivity, just due to configuration or even potentially operating system issues. And these automations figure out what's going on and help you resolve them directly. So they can be triggered through just a direct link. You can choose your resources and have these run. The coolest part about these automations is they can also fit into your pipeline. So you could have these fully automated, meaning that you detect the issue, you engage these automated workflows, and they solve the problem. And lastly, they also help to gather a lot of useful diagnostic information to root cause more hard problems that might occur as well. So we have many of these available to you that you can see through our knowledge center or through our support automation page in the Systems Manager console or the support center as well. These can be very useful in helping you running on AWS and also when you're migrating onto AWS. As an example, right now we have my automation available to you to move your classic resources into VPC as well.
Fantastic. So thank you, Tipu. And again, if you're interested in knowing more about the support automation workflows and what they can do for you, I'll recommend you watching the past AWS Supports You episode that you can find at the link that I pasted in the chat. Okay, so I don't see any question in the chat at this moment. And again, please feel free to ask any question you would like about migration and moving workloads to AWS. Be more than happy to answer those questions. Tipu, the first thing I want to ask, though, while we're waiting, if there's any question, is what is the most common question you get from customers when they start planning their migration?
By far, it is how do I plan my capacity and how do I right size my virtual machines or my EC2 instances? And this is really important because you want to make sure that your application can run, but you're using your resources very efficiently. Now, one of the benefits of using AWS is that you can elastically move resources, change their sizes very fast, and then they can also scale horizontally as well. So this helps you to just optimize on your application. If anything goes wrong, no problem. You can just change the size, you can scale up and down without interrupting your customer traffic or minimizing that interruption. When you're going through the right sizing exercise, though, we have a few tools that make it very easy for you. So one is Compute Optimizer, and so this helps you to figure out how much of your resources are being utilized and gives you suggestions for what you should use as well. Cluster Advisor will also give you alerts if your if your CPU is being used overutilized, same thing with network. And this helps you to really right size your instance, so using the right, most optimal size for your type of workload.
Yeah, and it is something that our customers often fear because they feel that are locked into something, right? And there's always that thing where they can always have a bigger instances or smaller instances depending on the time of the day. And whenever that fails, if your service really supports have a stateless service, you can use autoscaling as well to launch or terminate instances as you need them. Again, that goes with the first point, with the flexibility that being on AWS allows you to have with the both the use of resources and the cost that will often there. Another question that we get quite often from customers are about connectivity, right? So we do have a lot of customers asking about, especially after migrating, issues of how do I connect or what can I do? Now, there's a couple of things that you can do. We do have the main one is about RDS because or normally after they use DMS, they have moved all the databases to AWS, and they still have a legacy application that might need to connect from their on-premises location. So there is a couple of links that I want to have about those common questions where you can look at the Knowledge Center articles and that you can find out what are the tests that you can do to test what might be wrong. The thing though is that whenever you are having connectivity issue, especially if you freshly migrated to AWS and you're still not really sure in what are the connectivity capabilities that you might have, is simply to open AWS support case and ask anyone to assist you. Will be more than happy in troubleshooting with you and trying to figure out what might be the reasons why this is not working. Again, you need to think about Premium Support as the main partner, especially in the middle of a migration, that can assist you with whatever technical challenge you might be facing when moving your workloads. Okay, with that said, Thibaut, anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, Francesco's right. We got your back. And with the saw automations that we mentioned earlier, we actually have an automation that figures out what's going on with the connectivity between your RDS database and what your source is. Quite often, it's about configurations such as your security groups, or perhaps some firewalls in between that weren't allowing some type of traffic to go in. So those type of automations really made that easier. And it's not just happening with RDS. It also, for example, with EC2, we recently launched a service called the VPC Reachability Analyzer that also helps you to figure out where the connectivity is being blocked. You obviously want to make sure that these connections and the security groups and firewalls are kept tight, only allowing this IPs or the security groups to communicate that need to communicate with each other, but at the same time, the ones that should be able to talk to each other should have those relevant rules and routing to make that possible. And so these support automation workflows help you with that, and so does VPC Reachability Analyzer. I want to highlight one more question that we do hear a lot about from customers, which is about um, how to move data into AWS S3, Simple Storage Service, and then also the same thing, like if I'm getting access errors getting into S3, how do I address those? So for the first part though, Francesco, how should people think about moving data into S3?
So I'm glad you're asking, especially because it is one of the things I wanted to touch before I had the connectivity issues. A lot of different ways. So if you have direct connect, especially with public direct connect, you can move data directly to S3. But one of the things that I love the most is when you have so there we have a lot of customers that might have a poor connectivity, and there's no family allows you to move terabyte, if not petabyte of data without any issue. So we'll send you devices to your place where you can upload the data, and then we'll take care of moving that. And if you haven't seen, one of the coolest thing is a snowmobile. It's one of those cool tech moments where we'll send you an actual truck that can support petabytes of data to move data from your data center, especially in poor connectivity issue, where it might take days, if not months, to transfer that data, and we'll upload directly to S3 for you. Obviously, this is when we helped a lot of customers move quite substantial amount of data. You can see a few testimonials inside the link that I just pasted you, but might be a bit overkill. In any other case, the data migration, data sync can help you moving data to S3 as an export point, and you can use the SDK or the CLI just to move the data as easy as possible. Okay, perfect. I think that's one last question. I think so. Mokatek Place is asking, I have a traditional old school LAMP website and I've been meaning to go to AWS. Which one would be a good choice of a service? Maybe Beanstalk? Tipo, you want to take this last question?
Sure. So for a LAMP stack, If you just have your code up in a package, Beanstalk is a fast way for you to deploy it. It's going to make sure that it's highly available if you choose that option as well. So I'd recommend that. Otherwise, Lightsail or EC2 are also options for you.
Yeah, and the Lightsail is built exactly for this purpose, especially if you want not even have the using a complex deployment strategy. That's a platform meant to be hosting simple websites. Okay, thank you. I think we are at time. So everyone, today we looked at strategy, techniques, and services that you can use to move either your new workload to AWS or existing workloads, and how you can use those techniques to accelerate your journey to AWS. So thanks for the moderator. We can have a link for the page for next episode, so you can register there. Please bookmark this page. You will find all the upcoming episodes, and we hope you join us next time. So if you have, there are any questions that we left unanswered today, you can post your questions both on the forums.aws.amazon.com or email us any feedback at awssupportsyou@amazon.com. You can look at, you have the link in the stream. So we really want to hear from you. Tell us what else you would like to see on this show. And again, thank you for joining AWS Supports You, and happy cloud computing.